Of us.
Okay. If Phantom Ben is joining us.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Yeah, no, okay, that's weird. I don't know why there's still three screens.
The ghost of Ben. He just wants to be here.
Right, there we go. Okay, so now we're just back to two. Welcome
Cool.
to once again today's edition of How to Do a Live Stream. You'd think I would have gotten better at this in the past 3 months, but you'd be wrong. So we have this is funny because the last let's say 6 times we've been late to the live stream, and so there have been like 35 questions by the time we showed up. But today, like Steph, you and I were actually on time, which is not Ben's fault. It's just we were on time. Um, and so there's like not as many questions. It's like, hi everybody, I'm excited. Happy hour. I love that people are drinking, or some people are drinking anyways. Steph, do you have a cocktail?
So yeah, I'm double fisting right now. I have my noon electrolyte water to recover from the 85-degree weather trail run I just did, and I also have my sea quench sour from Dogfish Head Brewery, so that I can rehydrate and dehydrate at the same time.
I sort of love that.
Drinking the water,
Right,
I
it's
swear.
efficient. It's very efficient. So Ben is hiking today. He and Ford are in southern Utah, and so he can't join. But I thought, given like it's very topical, and people have had so many questions about like national parks and doing stuff outside, and like last time we talked, Steph. And for people who don't know, this is Steph. She is our resident outdoor expert and other things. You're expert at
Some
other things too. But like with this crowd of inside kids, you are definitely the outdoor expert.
I'm an expert in IT right now. It feels like with all this work from home, that's my third career is in IT.
Right? Who would have thought? Who would have thought? So, people have had so many questions about and I think especially people who have maybe never planned like a summer vacation that involved sort of road trips and outdoors and national parks. And so I thought it would be good to sort of chat through that and like answer some of those questions and talk about planning. And then if you guys have other questions about other just random things, of course, like post them and we'll answer those too. So I guess I will kick it off. So how do you want to give people some examples of like the kind of travel that you and your husband and family generally do for people who might not have been keeping up?
Yeah, so well, there's pre-COVID travel and there's post-COVID travel around my neighborhood. So it's been very different. But pre-COVID, I did a lot of road warrior travel for work, but I always tried to get kind of crafty and stick around for an extra couple days and do some hiking or some climbing somewhere. I do a lot of travel back and forth to the Bay Area, so Yosemite has kind of become my second home, and it's a lot of last minute spontaneous road trips. And then when we travel internationally, we try to do some kind of, not on the table right now, but some kind of multi-day hiking, trekking. So whether it's something really famous like the Inca Trail in Peru or some more obscure stuff in Malaysia or in Patagonia or in other places, we try to get some outdoor activity in. I'm an avid climber. It's been this whole staying at home and not really being supposed to climb has been impossibly hard for me. I think I might be ready to dabble again on Saturday. Our gym opened up yesterday, but I haven't gone yet. I'm kind of holding off on that for right now. And then a lot of skiing
That's
too.
a big escalation.
I
Like,
know. I know. Well, outdoor climbing. I'm not quite ready for indoor climbing yet. I'd prefer it's been pretty much okayed in my region. I live in Connecticut, so things have started to slow down enough that they're able to start opening up some stuff again, and the climbing areas have mostly opened up around here with a few exceptions. But I don't have a live-in climbing partner. I don't climb with my family. I climb with other people. So there's the is the sport okay factor, and there's the is it okay to go with someone else that I trust has been kind of following the same level of social distancing that I've been comfortable with factor. So I'm getting there. I think I'm maybe almost there, but that's been a lot of running around the neighborhood and doing virtual races and that sort of thing recently. So haven't gotten out too much further afield. Some hiking around the state, but that's about it.
wow, that is really complicated. The whole like hanging out with other people is becoming really complicated socially too, I feel. Because it's like, oh my gosh, I would love to do that with you, but I need your receipts from where you've been.
Yeah. I don't leave home. Like I barely know what it's like to go out. We go to the grocery store and that's about it. So I've been working from home since March. Never in a million years did I think I would say that. But it's yeah, it's a lot of it is just how comfortable are you with not just what you've been doing, but the other people that you're going to interact with and the other people that they've been interacting with and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so that's, I think, a really good point and a good lead in to this because people have been talking a lot about, like, okay, well, if I'm going to travel domestically, like, there's some beautiful parts of the US. I'm going to go see them. And I
You
love that
mean
you're just
your
like,
metaphorical you, the royal
huh?
you. Is
Well,
that the
no, I mean, I live someplace beautiful, so I'm totally
you
fine.
live in a beautiful place?
Yeah. So, like,
I love
yeah, I am very much at the point of like, if we go someplace this summer, we will go someplace more rural and rent a house for like a week or two, where it's like a change of pace and different walls. But because I have those same concerns, like everyone who I'm going to be interacting with, whether it's park rangers or just the guy at the gas station, and I feel like the stress of are other people being respectful and considerate would just make me really sad because I think I already know the answer and I don't need to have it confirmed.
and I think it's kind of regionalized too, based on if you live in a place where your local governments and local ordinances have taken it really seriously, and or you're in a place that's been a hotspot, you're probably going to default to already wearing masks or at least having a mask with you if you're just going outside for a hike, or you're probably following social distance a lot more, not just for legal reasons, but for logistical, everybody else is doing it reasons. So I live in Connecticut. I think we're pretty careful. We don't really leave the house except for errands. We have one other family that comes over for outdoor social distant dining once a week. It's a great opportunity to get our screened in patio all set up, and we know exactly where they've been and what they do. And so I think we're pretty good. But then I talk to friends in New York or Northern California, and I'll say, "Oh, hey, I saw another person this weekend." They're like, "What? You saw a person? You hung out in real life? Like, how is that even possible?" So I think my friends and my sister lives in New York. I think they've taken it incredibly seriously, and now they're on the downtrend. But it's been just a very different world for them. Same with my friends who live in the Bay Area, and that's where most of my social circles are. But then I talk to clients in different parts of the Midwest or different parts of the South, and they're like, "Yeah, we've been open since late April. It's pretty much business as usual here."
Yeah,
And
I
it's
had
just
someone tell me, you should go
different.
out more. There is no COVID. It's over. You should see
Okay.
what other people are doing. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's exactly why I'm not going out more because,
I'll go out with you. I'll go out, but
yeah.
yeah.
So on that note, like if people are feeling more like, okay, I want to go, nothing crazy, not too far, but maybe I do want to go to, I mean, I wouldn't recommend Yellowstone or Yosemite this summer because I think that there's going to be 9 million people there. But I do want to do some kind of more outdoor activities, but I've never really done anything like that before. Where should someone start?
So I think that a lot of it there's depends on the first thing to decide is am I driving or am I at a point where I'm comfortable flying? And I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't do one or the other, but know the risks of both. Driving, obviously, you can control your environment. I may or may not have done a 2-day road trip from Colorado back to the East Coast at the beginning of this whole thing when I decided that I didn't want, I was on a ski trip that got canceled and I didn't want to get on a plane back
Right, you
home.
were coming back the same time that I came back from Morocco, where it's like, and I just talked about that in the intro today. Like it seemed on Sunday, it seemed like a totally reasonable thing to do to go to Morocco. And by Friday, when I was coming home, it was like, what the hell? And then, like, you were coming home on Sunday. And by Tuesday, it was like literally we were putting all of our efforts into like helping people find repatriation flights. It was
Yeah.
like that. So,
Mhm. And that's still, I don't think that's something that's going to happen in this country. I just don't see the hotspots locking down again, but it is a consideration that it's something that could potentially happen. I'm not going to sit here and say that it won't happen or that flights won't get canceled. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Other risk factors of flying, if you're in the contained space with other people, they have the air filtration systems, but you can't control who is or isn't wearing a mask around you. You can only control your behavior. So it's a risk to take. The risk of driving, of course, is you're going to have more points of contact along the way. If you're doing a multi-day road trip and you're trying to get from point A to point B, if I was going back to Colorado, for example, I'd have to change hotels every night. So I can't just depend on having one point of contact that's concentrated for a short period of time. I'm having fewer points of contact for longer periods of time. So that's the first decision to make, is what's your comfort level with that? Where are you going to go? If it's going to be local or not local. The other thing that I think is worth considering is if you're going somewhere more rural. I know that we love to hype up Marriott and Hilton and Hyatt and all those great programs that are out there, but if you're going to Acadia National Park in Maine, or I don't know, Glacier National Park in Montana, to name something a little bit more rural than the ones that you brought up, not a whole lot of those properties out there. So it's myself and my husband, and then I have 3 stepkids, and we do some travel on our own and some travel with them. So whenever we go on vacation somewhere, we always look for minimum 2 bedrooms, minimum 2 bathrooms. That's the only way that it works with 5 of us. So
Right.
Booking.com we do some Airbnb, some VRBO, but Booking.com also has home and hotel and apartment rentals. So that's kind of our go-to. We also discovered just the other day that apparently Marriott in some select locations has a home rental page. It's usually really expensive, high-end. My husband stumbled across it. I didn't even stumble across it on my own, but it showed up as an option. These are like the 10, 12 person luxury cabins that you rent when you're going on a trip with your buddies, at least from what we've seen. But it's a nice option to have, but I plan on kind of trending away from some of the go-to hotel brands that we've talked about. Obviously, you've got your go-to Capital One purchase erasers and your Chase Ultimate Rewards portals that let you do that. So there's still plenty of ways to hack the system.
Even the paying yourself back with the Chase points now can be like a reasonable thing for like gas stations and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys still look for space, even if you're going someplace within like a day's drive. If you're taking the kids,
if it's an overnight, if I'm sleeping in a room with, if we just take the girls, we have 2 older girls and a younger boy. If we just take the girls, we can all kind of tough it out in one room for the night. If we're just going up to New Hampshire, if it's the 5 of us for a week, we're getting space. And the other thing we looked at is, do we want to move? If we're going somewhere, do we want to move properties, or do we want to stay in one spot? And normally we're like, great, let's go. Let's see as many things as we can. 5-hour drive to Yosemite. Who cares? Let's do it. Let's go. We'll drive through the night. We'll get there. They're great about getting up early. Yeah. They can sleep in the car. They won't forget it. But I don't want to have to Clorox wipe 3 different properties. I want to do that.
Right. That's actually a really good point, and something that I think is sort of lacking. Like, a lot of these places aren't really accustomed to having an influx of travelers with new expectations. Like, this is new for everybody. So nobody really knows. And like the vacation rental place, maybe doesn't really know what the expectations are of somebody coming from New York, who's been dealing with this really closely. So I think communicating that ahead of time, or asking questions like, hey, do I need to Clorox wipe when I get there? Or what is your cleaning protocol? I think that's going to be really successful or important.
I've kind of been operating under the premise that there's a really great marketing opportunity, whether you're a guiding company, whether you're a hotel brand, an independent property, there's a great marketing opportunity in talking about how good your cleaning protocol is. So if they're not writing about it, I'm going to assume that they're not doing it. I'm not going to assume that. And I'll bring my own stuff. They may still be charging the cleaning fee and the COVID fee, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're cleaning it the way that I would want to have it cleaned. So I just kind of tend to assume that if I want it the way I want it, I'm going to have to take care of it. So we'll they down the high touch surfaces. We'll take care of it, and then we'll
figure it out.
Yeah, go from there. Yeah.
So talking about if they aren't advertising it, you assume they're not doing it, and so you're just going to take care of it on your own. For people who maybe they don't hike, they do a couple hours, they're fit, they just don't hike. Can we talk about some of the things that you would maybe want to bring or have a plan for getting? And the motivation for this is that Ben and Ford are in Zion, and they rented some hiking sticks and stuff like that because they didn't bring them.
Mhm.
And it was a disaster because no one around them was being conscientious or concerned about social distancing. Like everyone's touching everything and breathing on everything, and they were like, this is not good." So are
Yeah.
there like some basic things that people could plan on
Well, yeah,
bringing?
yeah. Zion's a little special because you're hiking like literally through water in some places, so you need a little bit more equipment. You can buy $30 trekking poles at Walmart and Target, and it's not going to cost you that much more than renting the high end ones. And in all honesty, you're probably not going to know the difference. And keep them at the end of the trip or ditch them at the end of the trip if you're flying. That's not that hard. As far as other equipment, for hiking, you don't really need a whole lot of stuff. I big on wearing wicking non-cotton clothing, which is, some people are like, yeah, of course that's what you do. But if you've never done it before, you don't know, especially if you're going to a hot destination. It's just, you'll be a lot more comfortable. If nothing else, buying non-cotton socks, even if everything else that you have happens to be cotton, is just you're gonna have a much better time with it.
We might
You
have to
should
do a gear list because I hadn't, I wouldn't have thought about that for telling someone for just like, oh, doing national park stuff. But when we were in Greece last summer, we went hiking in northern Greece, which I mean, no one really goes to. And we had brought that stuff, and it's sort of second nature. Like I didn't really think about I need to get my, my equipment. It's just like, oh, we're going to be hiking, so I should bring like these wicking socks and like this other type of stuff. That
Well, I forgot my own rule a couple weeks ago. I went on a long run and I was like, I'm out of, it's not that hot out today. I'll wear my cotton socks because all the other ones are in the wash, and I regretted it almost immediately. So it's fresh
you
on
still
my
have
mind
blisters.
right now. Yeah. Yeah. I just recovered from like the blister of the century, but it took a little while. And you don't want that, because you don't want that to happen on your first day of vacation. You want to be able to recover in between days if you haven't done a whole lot of hiking. Other material, to have some kind of backpack with you, obviously. So, I shouldn't say obviously, but some kind of small backpack that you can just throw some snacks and some water in. Having a hydration pack like a Camelback is nice to have. It's not a must-have, but it just, especially if you're going to a hot place like Zion or anything in the Southwest, it's just, you have the hose that hits your shoulder and you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, I should probably drink something right now because it's really hot out. These hydration tabs, these noon hydration tabs are money. I've been living off of them because it's really hot and it's really humid where I live, and I sweat a lot. And sometimes regular water, your body doesn't absorb it as much, and you tend to lose sodium pretty quickly. So having the rehydration tabs, even if you just drop half of one in, it's really nice. Noon, Nuun is the brand that I like, although I'm starting to get a little sick of them. So if anyone has other recommendations, like flavors are getting a little bit old, but it's a lot more satisfying too. And the other thing to keep in mind now, and these are kind of a hot commodity item, so they're a little harder to get, but I don't usually wear a mask when I hike unless I'm passing other parties. I got in the habit for a while of carrying one with me and putting it on and taking it off and but then you're touching it a million times, and it's not ideal. You're really just preventing the respiratory transmission when you're near other people. You're not sitting in close quarters with them for extended periods of time. But I bought a really light buff from REI. It was like $30. I wear it around my neck, and then it gets a little hot, but it's a pretty lightweight material, so I don't feel it too much. And I pull it up if I'm coming near other people, and then I just pull it down again, and I don't have to put it in my pocket or take it out of my pocket a million times. And it just, even if I'm 20 feet away from someone and I'm not going to come close enough, if I'm wearing it around my neck, it shows that I'm thinking about it. And so there's
right. And it's part of that
actually
social contract. Like, I'm thinking of this, you should be thinking of this. We can all enjoy this space together.
Mm-hmm. There's a little bit, I mean, I'm not saying it's all about optics. It really is about keeping each other safe, but there's a little bit of that visual cue that you can do a couple things to kind of provide that. And our kids have homemade masks that they tie around. They made these cool, fancy ones that you can tie around the back of your head. I just bought the 5-pack from Amazon that everybody has. But they just keep them around their neck. And then when we see someone coming up, we're just like, okay, masks on. And they know. They're trained to do it at this point. They know. They put them on. They take them off once we pass. They're probably even more conservative with it than I would be, but I'm not about to stop them.
Right.
They're already playing by the rules, and our youngest is 10, and he knows exactly what to do. So if you got kids, you can train them up too. They'll get in the habit if you create good habits early on.
Yeah, that's really good points. I think a lot of the stuff you mentioned too about just like basic water and hydration for people who aren't used to going to national parks or state parks even, and are maybe used to doing some more like urban adjacent activities, it can be jarring because there's not actually anywhere to buy things
Hmm.
a lot of the time. Like if you're doing like the drive, even like Bryce, which is one of the smallest national parks, it's like what, 50 square miles. So it's basically the same size as Manhattan. Like, you can buy things on the way in and you can buy things on the way out. If you like drive, even doing the like very cush one end to the other, like there's nowhere to stop and buy like a bottle of water. There's not those little kiosks selling postcards and gum like you might see in a foreign country. Like they're
Yeah. It's even Canadian national parks, you'll have more of that stuff than you do in the US. It's that much more isolated. And I think the other thing that's important to keep in mind is that there are even less somewheres now to potentially stop and buy things
right.
than there were before, because a lot of services just aren't opened up yet. I think most parks are open to a certain degree, but that doesn't mean that every service station is open. That doesn't mean that every shop or every visitor center is open. That doesn't even necessarily mean every bathroom's open in some
Right.
cases. So you have to plan for all of that in advance when you're taking that into consideration. And I'm big on just bring more than you think you're going to need and be pleasantly surprised, as opposed to not have. I've been stuck out without enough water plenty of times. It's a lesson that I've had to learn more than once, and it's just not that fun.
Do you guys camp?
We do, yeah. For me, camping is more like a means to an end. I'm not really big on, I'm going to go camping so I can sit in my tent because that's really fun for me. It's more like the camping gets me closer to these rocks that I can climb or these mountains that I can hike than I would if I was staying in a hotel that was 30 or 40 miles further away. So if camping means I can sleep in an extra hour in the morning, then I'm all for it. But I don't like I like a campfire. I don't necessarily get great joy out of sleeping on the ground, but I do plenty of it. I'm used to doing it to get to where I need to go.
Yeah, we've been talking about camping because I grew up camping, like that's what we did because like we had no money. So that's what you do, right? When you live in the
Yeah.
western part of the US and like there's no money, like you go camping in national parks. Like that is your
When you
vacation
go
every
to
summer.
and you have nice places to go, none of that
Yeah,
hurts.
exactly, exactly. So I mentioned that to my husband. I was like, maybe we should just go camping. And he looked at me and it was like we were just so far apart on camping because he didn't do that as a kid. Like his parents, he and I are the same age, but his parents are older. So like it's not, I guess this is the first thing. It's not comfortable to sleep on the ground if you're over 40. Even really probably if you're over 35. Like you need to plan like a pad or a cot. It's just a little harder.
And you should buy a tent that's bigger than you think you need. Like a two-person tent is not really a two-person tent.
No.
A two-person tent is a comfortable one-person tent. A three-person tent is a reasonable two-person tent. And a four-person tent is a really good two-person tent or an okay three-person tent. Like they don't
Yeah.
actually
We
make
have
them.
a 6 person tent, which is what we would take if it were just the two of us and the dog, because like that's how many people can sleep in it. Like if you leave all your gear outside,
And there's just certain
basically.
points you just don't want that many people in a tent anymore. We've done plenty of camping trips. We had
Mm-mm.
like a 10-person tent and five of us
Oh
would
no.
sleep. But I don't want somebody getting up over four people if they have to get up in the middle of the night. I don't want to be woken up every time somebody breathes or turns over. It's no, no, no. Let's have two little tents. It's much better for everybody that way. So I get if you have little kids, obviously you have to keep them with you. But once you get past a certain age, even like ages 10 and 12, they can have their own tent. They'll be okay. They'll know what to do.
Right. Even if you have little kids, I would still probably recommend a second tent for stuff.
Stuff, yeah. And if you have a car, it's not as big of a deal necessarily. The other thing to keep in mind if you're out west, or even some places up north, or I guess my town in this case, because we've been having this issue too, but a lot of places have bear limitations, so you have to take your food and put it in a bear box because bears will like smell your food and break into the car. But the bear boxes are specifically made bear proof, so they theoretically won't get into that. Depending where you are, some places, again, it's a little bit more like a good precaution to take, but there's other places where, like, if you have a tube of toothpaste that's sitting in the backseat of your car and it's showing, you could potentially get ticketed for that. You probably
Really?
won't because rangers probably have better things to do, but I've heard of horror stories happening in places like Yosemite where the bears do kind of run rampant and act like they own the place. So it's just something else to be mindful of. Just have all your food, anything that a bear could potentially get into. If you have it all in one bag, it's just a lot easier to move it into the bear box. And it's just one thing you do at the end of the night before you go to bed. You don't have to think about it.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to transition to, I think this is meant as a sarcastic question, but as usual, I'm going to roll with it. So
All right.
what tents earn the most points? That's the important question. Because here's the thing, shopping portals are key, like for getting all this stuff. Like, don't just default to buying it off of Amazon. Like, sometimes there's deals, but you can generally buy things from like REI or Cabela's or Outdoor Warehouse. Like, I'm trying to be like big companies that people have heard of, but there might even be something local in your town. Um, City Prestige is doing 5 times points right now on online purchases. So that's easy. Even if it's like I've ordered things from my local bookstore on their website and I got 5 times points. Trying to
Nice.
think what
A
else.
couple other things that you can do if you're, so this is a little bit different than it's points, but it's not necessarily travel points, but a couple different ways that you can, if the goal is just to save money and to do the best you can, there's a website, moosejaw.com, that sometimes they're a medium-sized outdoor retailer and they have their own internal rewards program, and you can get like, I've gotten like 10 extra points back. I can only use them on their product. It's not like I can go and turn around and transfer them to Amex points and transfer those to Aeroplan and then book a flight with it. But I've gotten a bunch of free gear just by booking directly through them. They run a bunch of promotions all the time. There's another site called Active Junkie, ActiveJunky, that is, it's sort of like the Rakuten of the outdoor world. And so I wouldn't necessarily, if your move is to do Rakuten and Amex points, don't necessarily switch that strategy, but you can at least do it side by side and see who's offering the better deal and the better rebates, because they'll give you a cash back on top of whatever site you're booking through and whatever other internal rewards program that you're getting. So a lot of those outdoor sites have some sort of rewards program already built into it. REI, you pay a $20 one-time fee and you get membership for life. And I think it's 5% back on all purchases, and you get it in the form of a dividend once a year, and you can use it as a credit toward other items. They also have a credit card that I wouldn't recommend over some of the great other credit cards, unless like you grocery shop at REI, then I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But I did once upon a time before I was doing travel rewards. I think that was my first points earning credit card, was an REI card, and I got like 20% sounds too high, probably like 10% back on purchases up to a certain point. So there's a couple other little hacks like that out there, but I think for those of us who are still looking to maximize our travel rewards, those shopping portals are probably going to be our best deal. And actually, let me take that back. Buy something good that's going to earn you the best points, because then you don't have to buy a cheap, low quality item every couple of years and lose money that way. Like, buy something.
Right.
So
It's probably a little bit of a balance for people this year, though. Like, do you buy just the cheap thing to try something out and see if you like the concept? Because a lot of like outdoor stuff, it's an investment.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of the outdoor sports things, like we were talking about that, like, we snowshoe, but it's like if we wanted to start cross country skiing, like it's a sort of a significant equipment purchase to see if you even like it. And then it's like, would you enjoy it more if you had a better caliber of equipment? Or like, is this experience currently unpleasant because you have like a really cheap sleeping pad?
Yeah. So a lot of it depends on what it is that you're trying to do. So for a lot, like if you're going backpacking for the first time, what makes backpacking gear expensive isn't necessarily how durable it is or how waterproof it is. What makes backpacking gear expensive is how light it is. And that's the game changer between having a good time or having a less good time. If you're carrying 10 pounds less of gear on your back over 30 miles over 3 days, you're going to have a much better time than if you're carrying extra weight in like a steel frame as opposed to an aluminum frame, for example, or a heavier synthetic sleeping bag as opposed to a lighter down sleeping bag. Sleeping pads, it depends a little bit more on what your goal is. If you want to go out and into the woods, into the middle of nowhere, and carry the lightest thing possible, buy the really light inflatable sleeping pad. if you're planning on car camping and you can throw the kitchen sink into your trunk, don't buy the tiny inflatable sleeping pad because you'll be miserable on it. It looks like a little surfboard, and I spent plenty of nights on those. There's plenty of cushier air mattresses that'll just make you have a much better experience. So
Right,
a
and if
lot
you're
of it,
going car camping and doing that, like get the pump so you can just inflate it off of your electrical outlet in the car and save yourself that 45 minutes of frustration too.
other stuff, like you gave the example of Ben and the trekking poles. I personally don't see a lot of difference between $100 black diamond carbon fiber trekking poles that you may or may not break if you're not careful versus $30 Walmart trekking poles that are going to be almost as good. And if you break one, or if you forget them at the end of the trip, or maybe they fall off of your backpack when you're checking it and it ends up in Jackson Hole and the trekking poles aren't there anymore because they're strapped to the outside, maybe. But who cares? If they're nuts, you go to the nearest socially distant convenience store that you're comfortable with, and you agree with their policy, and you just replace them. No big deal. So it really
It's like
depends on.
pool noodles, really, but for interior trips.
Yeah. Yes.
It's actually something, if you are like, if you have an Airbnb someplace in the interior of the country, you're advertising like, bring a trekking pole, leave a trekking pole is the be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we have these for you, and we have Clorox wipes so you can wipe them down yourself. Yeah. That being said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that people go like all out on I'm going to do all the new outdoor activities this summer. I think just like maybe be conscientious or think about these things rather than just being like, oh, sure, I'll just pop into Yosemite. It sounds fun. Because like it is a little bit more involved than that, but it doesn't mean you have to go into like full on gear and hiking
No
mode.
such thing as popping into Yosemite unless you live in El Portal or Lee Vining, which are the two towns on either side of the park. But you don't want to buy hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of gear for something that you're not going to do again. But buy some synthetic socks. It's
right.
pretty awesome. Get a couple pairs of socks. You'll just be so much happier for it.
Yeah.
Doesn't
A basic
matter.
backpack. Yeah, little things. So for some of these, I think that's a good point. Like you're talking about like Yosemite, and it's not super accessible. Just if nothing else, driving makes it more complicated. Some national parks are more accessible depending on where you live. Like growing up in Utah, you can go to southern Utah and like you can drive into a lot of it. Like Capitol Reef has like 4 drives that you can do. So even if you aren't super ambulatory, you could still go and experience a lot of the national parks. I don't know where I was going with this.
Would you like to talk about which national parks are acceptable, or is that the direction?
No. I think I was more thinking of just like, so distances are further than you expect. And I think that's sort of a thing to think about too. Like if you're looking at lodging or accommodations, and like think about the length of a trip. So you spend a lot of time in Yosemite. Like how long would you say people should plan for
So
like a family trip, like more casual?
Yeah. If that's your only destination, you're not going anywhere else, I would say at least minimum 3 or 4 days, unless you're a Bay Area local and you can just drive up for the weekend. But if you're flying in and that's your only destination, just stay for a week. There's plenty to do. You've got, in a place like Yosemite, you've got the Valley, which is going to be really hot this time of year, but that's where all the big rocks are. That's the famous place that everybody goes. You have Tuolumne, which is the high country. That's my absolute favorite. That's where I like to go, especially in the summer. There are still some road closures this time of year because of, I don't know if there's any this year. I don't know when they open up, but it's usually right around the end of June because of snow. It's so high up that they can get snow into late June, and it's a little bit more isolated up there. You still get people, but it's not as crowded as the Valley. And you're also, once you get up there, you're accessible to the Eastern Sierra, so you can drive out to like Mammoth, which I think is about an hour, a little bit more from the Tuolumne Meadows Visitor Center, and you've got a whole other set of mountains that you can explore. And there's a ton of hiking just outside the park too, so particularly on the eastern side. And to me, that's almost even more interesting than the park itself because you don't have as many people when you get these real like moonscape landscapes in the mountains there in that high Sierra. So, and I think you bring up a good point, though, with driving and time planning. And this is, again, one of those things that I've learned the hard way. 30 miles in Yosemite or in the Rockies in Colorado or in southern Utah, unless you're on a major highway, 30 miles there is not the same as 30 miles unless you live in LA, and it's maybe the same because of traffic.
Well, maybe that's a good thing. Like, it is the same as 30 miles in LA or Manhattan, not the same as 30 miles, like, generally.
And if you get car sick, try to be the one who drives, because it's lots of switchbacks in a lot of those places. So just plan for everything to take longer than you think it's going to. If you decide you want to take a park shuttle, plan for that to take even longer, because they make stops along the way, like Ben's in Zion right now. And what you do there is you park, and there's a certain point where you can't drive in any further, and the park bus takes you back and forth. So even if you're not planning on wearing a mask when you're out and you're hiking, you should still have one with you so you can put it on when you're on the bus with all these other people who've also just been out hiking. But the bus makes stops along the way. It doesn't just go right to your destination. It'll stop here and it'll stop here. They have all these numbered stops. So just another consideration to think about when you're trying to calculate times, that most stuff takes longer. If you're an avid hiker, the posted amounts of time it takes to do the hike are probably going to be shorter. If you've never done a big hike in a national park before, it's probably going to take a lot longer than whatever the posted time is. So just plan for all that stuff too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And what you're talking about, people and sort of density, is interesting. Arches is like, that whole area is one of my favorite national parks, but everyone hikes to Delicate Arch because that's the one that everyone has seen, and it's beautiful. Like, it's a beautiful hike and it's a beautiful arch. But you can take, instead, like if you take the Devil's Garden walk, there are like 7 or 8 arches, and no one takes it because it's not the big name one. So I'd highly recommend anybody who's looking at these places, like, get a guidebook or read online and look specifically at like the national park pages and what are they recommending, what's open, what's shut. Even like you were saying, are all the bathrooms open in the whole park, or are only the bathrooms by the parking lot open? And
be prepared to, if you see a parking lot that's full, maybe you don't want to do that hike. Maybe you want to go and do a different hike. So have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. That's, in the climbing world right now where I live, that's one of the big things. Is I don't want to hang out at the base of the cliff with a bunch of other people who I don't have their receipts, as Tiffany said. I want to have other options if I need to go. If I'm going to go somewhere else, I want to be able to know what else is available. So just plan to have more than one option. And if you are going to do that Delicate Arch hike, for example, and you're there for a week, don't do it on Saturday. Do it on like Tuesday, or
right.
Even going out early in the morning. We've been doing a lot. I'm about an hour away from the Appalachian Trail, and there's a couple of really popular hikes around here. And we've been intentionally, sometimes we only can go out on weekends, but we'll go out first thing in the morning. And what we find is on the hike out, we hardly pass anyone else. We'll pass a lot more people on the hike back, but it's that many fewer points of contact. So if it's a concern for you, the earlier you go, the less likely you'll be to have other people around you.
Yeah, earlier you go, or sometimes even later in the day. Like if you're looking at some of the short hikes that are like 1 to 2 hours, especially as we get into summer and things are open later, it's okay to do like a later afternoon hike, as other people are wrapping up. That can sometimes, but obviously you don't want to do too long of a hike if you're not confident in your hiking ability and how long it will actually take you. You don't want to be coming back in the dark. These are like things that I sort of feel like I shouldn't have to say, but then when I talk to people who don't do a lot of this stuff, they're like, what? So I guess it's worth saying.
It's really hot in the middle of the day. Unless you're in like northern Montana, where I think it was 40 something degrees this week, it's going to be hot in the middle of the day.
Yeah, it was 43 here last week, and I nearly rioted.
Because good reason.
It's June. It's just unacceptable. Okay, so going back to what you were saying, like a lot of the areas that are adjacent to national parks are also really beautiful, but aren't the big name draws. Mm-hmm. How do you find those places, and like, what's sort of your approach?
So a lot of it is just trial and error and talking to other people, but there's an app that I use that's called All Trails, and that's a really good starter area for hikes because it'll give you all the hikes in the area. It'll tell you the level of difficulty, how many miles, how long it's going to take. And if you have satellite, you can actually download the app and it tells you where on the trail you are. So if you're
I
with
like
kids,
that.
it's really cool because you can say, hey, we're the red dot right now. The blue dot is where we're going. Maybe it's the other way around, but then they can say like, oh, I get that. Like, okay, I can see how
Okay.
far we've gone and how far we haven't gone. So that's been really helpful. Even just like a Google Maps search, if I see that there's a national forest that's near the national park that I am right now, that probably means that there's some cool stuff. That probably means that it's going to be less high traffic. There's probably going to be a little bit fewer regulations, and it's not going to be as heavily patrolled. Probably won't be as many people. Everything's just a little bit more chill on the national forest side, even with things as far as like campgrounds. So Yosemite, you probably still, even given everything, you probably still need to reserve a campground in Yosemite. Usually, like, I think the window opens up sometime in mid-March, and people, it's like Best Buy the day after
Right.
Thanksgiving.
They stay up all night so they can like get their Yosemite.
Now there's a few that are walk-in, but you'll get a lot more walk-in campgrounds in National Forest or BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and you can get a lot more walk-in campgrounds. Usually fewer amenities, but it's a lot easier that way than reserving in national parks.
Right. Your point about fewer regulations is also interesting. Like for most national parks, you either need admission or you need to buy the annual national park pass. The national forests, it's a different situation parking, but also like you can bring your dog hiking on a lot of national forest trails, and you can't in most national parks. Like it's just, even in a park that allows dogs, it's like only on this trail or only on this trail during these hours. But state forests and national forests are a little bit less restrictive. I've been researching this because I think we're going to go to Montana this summer if we do. And it's like, okay, like you even bother with Glacier because we're going to bring the dog. And there's like one trail in Glacier that they're allowed on, and it's like a 3/4 of a mile hike.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not going to work. Like 3/4 of a mile is just getting her started.
Not those big dogs you have. That's a problem that I wish I had. But in real life, I travel too much to have a dog. Right now, this would be a
Right.
perfect time. But I'm not planning on doing this for the next 10 years, so I haven't pulled the trigger yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think instead we might do like Bitterroot
Okay.
and go a little bit further south in Montana where it's like, it's like a not, it's a more state parks and national forests and hopefully fewer crowds of people who are like, oh, I'm going to check all of my national parks off the list this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing too. You have the people who want to see the park, and you have the people who want to check the park off of their list. And
My dad is the latter, 100%. Like we drove all the way through Yellowstone in a day once when I was a kid because he was like, now we've seen Yellowstone. Like we didn't even get out of the car.
yeah, well, and that's the thing is usually those people aren't also the ones getting out. They usually, I think something like 90% of national park visitors don't ever go more than a mile away from the roads. So
Wait, really?
yeah, I'm pulling it from somewhere in my
I
brain.
believe you,
Not
but like
right now, but with all the drive-bys and the road trippers, I would absolutely believe it. So one thing we haven't talked about a lot yet, but I know it's something that comes up when we're planning these kinds of trips is what about commercial operators, right?
yeah,
Like rafting or zip line tours or other, I mean, I know we talked a little about rentals, but other commercial operations. And I bring it up mostly because I have it's not my main gig, but I have some industry friends who work in that space who've been working frantically to try and reopen their guiding businesses or their zipline businesses and trying to get everything, all the boxes checked so that they can do it. And I think one of the advice I would give, because I've talked to people who are all over the spectrum in the range, everything from like, yeah, we're opening in late April, no problem. You don't have to wear a mask if you don't want to like, our guides are wearing face shields. We're only taking intact family parties out at a time. We're not going to make up groups of disparate people who come in. So we're charging just a flat rate for, up to 8 people if you're in the same household. And there's a whole range of policies. So I think
I wouldn't even have thought about that, but that's a huge. I'd be super mad if I showed up and like, oh wow, there's like 26 people now.
Yeah, well, if you're rafting, like they're going to fill up the raft. If you're going on a zip line tour, it's usually groups of about 8, and if you're out hiking and you're not wearing a mask, you're not going near anyone, that's one thing. But if you're on a zip line platform with 8 other people for an extended period of time, and it's like the size of my kitchen countertop, you probably want to know what their mask policy is before you sign up. So it's kind of my same rules with hotels. Like if you're going to book something, if they're doing a good job, they're probably going to go out of their way to tell you about all the policies that they put in, because it's a great marketing opportunity right now. And it'll be on their website. Hopefully they have a COVID page. Most of the ski resorts and other commercial outdoor operators do have those. And if they do, then that'll all be on there. It'll be on their social media page. If they're not doing, like, I think there's a couple of zip line tours in rural Georgia that just never closed down during the pandemic, or if they did, they didn't advertise it. And I'm like, I don't think I want to use you as the baseline for what reopening should or shouldn't look like. So if the information's out there, if they're putting it out and they're being really specific about it, then, and you're comfortable with whatever guidelines they outline, I say go for it. And maybe compare a couple different operators. Like rafting, if you go to Idaho or Wyoming or any of the places that Tiffany's lived, that's a major rafting destination, there's not going to be one operator. There's going to be 15 operators that all compete for the same business. So do a side-by-side, look at what they all have, see what their different policies are, and then just pick the one that you're most comfortable with. Because if they're competing with your business, they really should be doing a good job. And most of the operators that I know, it's really important to them, not just to reopen and to be safe, but also to, like, this is their season. This is the only time of year they get any business. So they want to be up and running as soon as possible. And they also don't want to get sued, because that's a huge, the outdoor industry, litigation is a huge piece. You pay a ton of money to get insured, and insurers are only going to cover them if they have certain policies. So if they're worth their salt, they should be doing a good job, but read about it, see what their policy is, see if you're comfortable with, and then decide from there.
But not all states have policies, so it's possible, as far as this all goes. So it's possible that some insurance companies haven't been like, hey, we're not going to honor your rafting insurance policy this year if you're not following a Californian's expectation of COVID practices, because here in Idaho, we don't believe in that. So, like, as long as you're following the government guidelines, which are maybe really loose, you're fine. So I think, to sort of your point about what are they advertising, I'm generally not this person, but I think this is probably a summer where it makes sense to call and ask pointed questions and just be like, hey, like, what are you doing? Obviously, you're going to fill up the boat, but like, how are you handling this and how are you handling that? And some of these companies may not have thought about it yet. Right? They're like, oh, we didn't realize this was something people were going to care about, and they might make those adjustments, or you might just choose to book it elsewhere.
Yeah. They might. There's because there's local governances, but most of those industries also, or those operators also belong to at least one industry association. So even if the state of Idaho, for example, doesn't require something, there has to be some rafting association. Everything from zip line tours to summer camps, they all have at least one or two governing bodies that are all hustling to put out recommended guidelines. They can't necessarily mandate and say you have to do this or don't have to do this, but most of the good operators, and they do exist all over the place, it's not necessarily localized to one geographic area or another. Like even in Connecticut, we have a bunch of aerial park ropes courses where you can go climbing. There's some that are just going to be better than others. There's some that operate at a higher standard than others, and the good ones will adhere to whatever the industry standards are. So if they've been real specific, here's our policies, here's why we have these policies, and they're advertising it, you can probably feel pretty good about it. Most of them probably aren't going to go quite that far. So if you're not sure, I absolutely agree. Picking up the phone will help get you there and get those questions answered. And that'll, I don't want to say don't go, because a lot of them really depend on this season, and this is the only time of year that they get any kind of revenue, and I don't want to see them go out of business, but they should also be held accountable to whatever safety standards the best companies are putting out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for a lot of that too, it's that holding accountable. I think giving people the chance to make adjustments is probably pretty important, because this is all so new. So even just calling and be like, so I was looking at the guidelines for such and such, and I just wanted to see, what are you guys doing? And if, letting that operator have the chance to sort of think about like, okay, people actually do care. I should market this better. I should make sure that my staff is ready, or like a little grace, I guess, is to your point. Like, it's not don't go. It's just maybe you have to lead from behind a little bit.
Yeah, and that's and the other thing is, if you call, you'll know how you're supposed to behave too. And I'm thinking about even like in the restaurant industry right now, there's an ice cream shop in town that just reopened for business a couple weekends ago, and they had this really great setup where you park in a designated spot. They come to your car, they take your order, I'm like, this is how we should do ice cream all the time. This is great. Except that there was no sign telling you to do that. So instead of parking in your car and waiting, every single person parked their car, got out of their car to ask the question, to go back to their car, to sit down, to wait, because they learned the hard way that that's how you're supposed to do it when they did it wrong. And it's one of those things that could have been like 90% resolved. They just put a sign up that said, wait in your car, we'll come serve you. But they just didn't think to do that because they were probably so concerned with all of the other safety operations. And I've been there a bunch of times. I know that it's something that's important to them. They're not going to forego that. They just haven't thought of everything yet because this is new to all of us. This is the first time any business has had to deal with it. So I think getting even just a little bit of intel on, hey, how am I supposed to behave? What should I be? Whether it's I have to wear closed-toed shoes because I'm rafting, or whether it's sign the online waiver before you get there because it's one less point of contact that you have to make. You don't have to touch the shared iPad or the shared pen. Getting the more information you can get in advance, the more comfortable of an experience it'll be for you when you show up.
Yeah, for sure. I would also add to that, talking about like this is new for a lot of businesses, and a lot of these businesses are super small. If you go to a website and you don't see anything, check their social media pages, because for a lot of businesses, I think updating their website is like this black box of you can't. Like they, people don't know how to do it necessarily, but they can put something on their Facebook that's like, hey, here's our updated policy. Or a lot of the restaurants here are doing that, where like they don't know, I'm sure updating their website is expensive versus putting something on Facebook is like, here's our menu for today.
Yeah. I have like 15 different ski resorts that I follow on Instagram just so that I can get the snow report. If I'm traveling to Utah, I know does Altar Park ski or have more snow. So it's a lot easier, and it happens. The chain of communication is just that much quicker. That's a good call.
Yeah, awesome. Any final thoughts or final questions? Someone's asking if Ben is going to Amangiri. He's not, because you have to book Amangiri like 2 years in advance, and who plans ahead like that?
I'd love to go to Amangiri.
I would too, but I think I'm so I've never been to an Amman, and so I'm so conflicted because I don't know if I'd actually enjoy it, or if I would be like, at this price point, it needs to be freaking magical, and I am not feeling like this magical, and then I would just be annoyed.
Mm-hmm. And there's a big difference between going and paying full retail and going. Like I can suspend all my I go camping, I can handle this for a couple of days and be pampered just fine. It's a price to enjoyment ratio. I agree with you. That's the issue.
And so then it's like, I feel that way, at some places where it's like, okay, like the Park Hyatt New York is a great example. It's like the worst, best hotel in the country. And it's outrageously expensive. If I were paying $1,100 a night, I would be really mad about the general ineptness and like the terrible coffee. But when you're sitting there on points, it's like, well, it's fine. I'm not really paying, so it's okay. Steph, what slopes are you dreaming of right now?
Well, I was just in Japan we got in right before everything went crazy. We were there December and early January, and it wasn't the most impressive ski terrain I've ever seen, but it was everything that you hear about with Japan, powder, and just the sheer quantity of snow. So I'd go back there in a heartbeat, and just the cultural experience around it. Instead of having like fries for lunch, you have ramen for lunch and mochi balls for dessert, and so that was all really cool. We found ourselves on New Year's Eve celebrating. We went to the resort to like their party, and it was a bingo night for up to 100 people. So we bought a bingo card, and us and 98 of our new Japanese friends were the only non-English speakers the entire time, which we didn't realize, or non-Japanese speakers, I should say, which we didn't realize until we got in there. And it was pretty entertaining. It was just a great time. It was a really cool cultural experience.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was cool. I think this winter I know that Vail extended their season pass policy, so they're pretty. I think they're definitely the more generous of the big season pass companies. I still don't think we're going to buy one this year. We have until Labor Day to decide if we want the full discounts, but just because there's so much unknown for this winter, I'd be really hesitant to pre-purchase anything, and it's probably a good opportunity to visit some independent resorts. So we might come your way, Tiffany. We might do some Whitewater and Red Mountain if the Canadian border is back open by then.
Right. If not, you could do Schweitzer. I mean, it's a little basic for you guys, but
we tried doing Schweitzer once. We did half a run. We parked at this parking lot. We skied down. or no, we rode the lift up. They let us ride the lift up because you ride the lift up to go buy your lift ticket, and it was just like an ice slope, and it was foggy, and it just wasn't going to get better. So we skied down, we skied back to our car. We're like, all right, that was good. Let's
Yeah, it's
come.
crazy because for my husband who is from Oregon, where like they went to Bachelor, like that was it. That was the only skiing. Which like Bachelor is really terrible skiing if you're a skier. Like it's, I mean, whatever, it's fine. You're skiing, everything's amazing, but it's not like amazing snow. So he skis up here, and I can't. Like I can't even manage it. I grew up skiing in Utah and Southern Idaho, so I'm just the most spoiled skier. And
Just go north to BC, and then you've got all the like that whole Selkirk
yeah,
Mountains and
but I'm like, what is this? What is this
like
ice stuff? Like, this is not skiing. This is in a different sport entirely. We call it ice skating, and you don't do it with any of this, and
yeah.
definitely not on a slope.
Yeah, I'm from New England, and so I started out skiing on ice, and I was like, oh, this is an okay sport. I don't mind. And it wasn't until I moved out west and was actually living in Arizona, which isn't really what you think of as a ski destination, but I was in Flagstaff, and they had the Arizona Snowball, which is a real mountain with real snow, and we were there in 2009, which was, I think, a record snow year for them, and I was like, this is awesome. I can ski powder during the day, and then I can sit in jeans and a t-shirt at the end of the day and drink beer and listen to the trains go by and look back up at the mountain. I was like, this is why people ski. Okay, I get it now. And now I'm totally thrilled. I ski once or twice a year in New England, and that's it. So again, that's the other reason why if we were just planning on staying local this winter, I'd consider getting a season pass. But with I don't enjoy New England skiing enough to justify pre-purchasing a season pass with the risk that that might be the only place that we can use it. I don't know. I'm still optimistic about going somewhere this winter. I just don't think that 3 or 4 ski-specific trips and having one of those multi-mountain passes is the way to go.
Yeah, especially given just like who knows how flying and everything like that is going to work and all of that. Danielle's asking if you've been to any impressive ski terrain outside of the U.S. Like you just talked about your trip in Japan, but anywhere where you felt like the terrain itself was really
Yeah,
great.
Chamonix in France was awesome. That was cool because you get a lot of the European skiing. You're kind of confined to just on piste, which is basically just the cat tracks that they push out, and anything outside of that, you're on your own. But Chamonix and Grand Monte specifically, which is the biggest resort in the area, it's a bunch of uh, resorts all over town. You have to take a bus to get from one to the other, but that particular resort just had really nice, like semi off piste, but you can still ski on it. It was still kind of managed within the mountain and just really dramatic. Like glaciers all around you, some of the best views that I've ever seen. A lot of really good. If you like steep stuff, there's plenty of it there, but it's still wide open, so you don't have to worry too much. And then if you want to get a little bit more extreme, if you're in Europe, just hire a guide. They'll take you to beautiful.
It's puppy time, apparently.
You have to go if you have other obligations. I think that we're
No,
just
I think, yeah, we're just wrapping it up. She's just, no, we have, because the house stuff never ends. We have to get new gutters. And so, like, the guy is here to, like, measure the gutters. You know, you buy a house and, like, you just turn on a faucet with money,
hmm.
and just the money comes out of the faucet the whole time you own the house.
And then you stay in that house that you're usually not in that much when there's a pandemic, and you notice
Right.
all
And
these things in the house
yes.
that you didn't need before.
Yeah. Like, I didn't know we needed new gutters until, like, now I'm here every day. I'm watching the rain. Like, we have a problem.
Then you also need new rugs, and you need a new fire pit outside, and you need new furniture for the patio, and it's all
Yeah,
these
or
things
if you're me, you also need the new patio. So yeah, it's a whole. Maybe we should do a like the cost of quarantine episode where we just talk about all the home renovations that everybody is doing because
how to best maximize your credit card points for your home renovation purchases.
yeah, exactly. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking time. I know it was short notice and that you've been like out running just prior, so thank
Oh,
you.
this is great. I didn't have to put up any PowerPoint decks. I could drink while I'm on the screen. This is so much easier than the work Zooms that I do.
So awesome. And maybe we'll put together more stuff on outside activities and summer vacations if this seems like something more people are going to do. So if you guys have questions, like let us know. And yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.